printing this little Prim Bunny on a, I think this is a, I did measure it. I think it's a 6x10 wooden tag. Yeah, 6x10 wooden tag. So we're going to be doing him. It's super easy. We're going to be doing a little stippling, a little bit of shading, not a lot, some dry brushing. So you're going to learn all kinds of different stuff tonight. So we're just going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to move my little bunny out of the way here. So he's not difficult. He's super simple, easy for beginners. So you don't have to, be too scared to try it. So I'm going to start with my background. It's quite dark. So I'm using a little mixture of black and burnt umber here, which I already have on my plate. Hi, Lisa from Maryland. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dip into mostly burnt umber with, hi, Tracy, and a little bit of black. And we're just going to put both of those on there. And we can kind of adjust it as we go. It's a little too brown, so I'm going to add a little more black to it. I want it to be darker. So kind of a bit that color, but I know you can't probably see the brown in there on the screen. I'm not sure if you can or not, but trust me, it's there. So it's kind of a really, really dark brown that I'm putting on the back here. You could put completely black if you wanted to, but I kind of wanted to add the little bit of texture, or a little bit of, yeah, I guess a little bit of contrast in there is the word I'm looking for. Hi, Miss Karina. Hi, Lori. Thanks everybody for joining in. Here's Miss Connie. Nice to see you. So I'm just putting a complete coat of that little mixture on here. We'll get our background on super quick so we can give it a dry and get our... We have returned. Thanks for sprinkling. Sorry, I didn't mean to ditch y'all. I don't have an extra set of hands for somebody to hand me something either. It's like I'm on my own. I'm a lone wolf over here, so I apologize. So we're going to give that a quick dry. I mean, if I miss anything, I'll catch it on the end when I go back and check. So I'm not ignoring you. I'm kind of got two devices going here, so we'll see what happens. So I have my white transfer paper now that I had to go run over across the room and get it. I'm hoping that's what this is. Yep. Okay. We're all set. So we can bring this little guy over here. And this is just the basic outline I just needed to get started. So this line drawing is pretty basic. I just kind of sketched it out fast. All right, so we'll get our little stylus here, and we'll get this traced over. Let me make sure. Oh, good, it's working. I did grab the right pack. This transfer paper looks so much like tracing paper in the package. I was afraid I grabbed the wrong one. Struggling tonight, girls, struggling. So we're here until 10 p.m. Eastern, but I know there's crafters after me, so make sure you go over and check them out over on the Craft Around the Clock page after I'm finished, because they have some good stuff cooking over there still tonight. My egg got a little wonky, but that's okay. We'll work with it. We will make it work. All right, let me see how I did. Okay, so we have our basic little, see how lovely that white transfer paper shows up on there? Where do I get my transfer paper? The white stuff I got from Amazon. Pack of 100. I'll probably never use that in years, but it was a pack of 100, so I did get it. Thank goodness for Amazon. Okay, so I have this little tiny stencil brush that I'm going to use to base out my bunny. So I'm just going to stipple my bunny to make him look like he's a little furry. And I'm just going to get my white over here, dip straight into that, kind of offload it a little bit. And I'll just be continuing to do that as I reload. So I'm just going to start here at his ear. And I'm just going to start tapping in that ear with my white. So it's just with white and this little stipple brush, stencil brush. And I mean, if you have one that's a 1/2 inch, I mean, it'll probably work. This one just is great because it's tiny enough to get in all these little tiny areas, you know, like it's small enough that I can fit down in here. If I had a bigger one, it might be a little more difficult, but I do like this little one. Kind of gets in those small areas. So bear with me while I get this little guy stippled. And I mean, who can't do this, right? I mean, sorry, this is so simple. You just have to stay within the lines. And you know what? If you go a little bit outside the lines, you want your bunny to look a little fluffy out there. So that's okay too. Just try not to go too far because that's going to change the whole profile of the shape of the ear or the face or whatever you're working on. And then we're just going to carry on. See, I can get down in the point of that ear really well with this tiny brush. So well, I like it for jobs like this. We're just going to get this first coat on here. And already he's starting to look nice and fluffy. You betcha, Marcia, you can do this one. Yep, you sure can. That's what I'm saying. This is so easy. This is not difficult at all, at all. And it's a really cool way to add some texture to your bunny. Or, I mean, you could do this with bears as well. Like, I mean, any animal that's fluffy like that. You can do this kind of technique. But yeah, super simple. So we're just going to get this basic coat on the whole sort of thing here. And we'll let that dry. So we're going to move on down to his face. Same thing. And I'm not going right up to his ears. I want to leave that little bit of a gap there because I'm using my background sort of as a bit of shade as well. So I'm just going to leave a little bit kind of showing in between the ears and the head. Like that. And we'll just carry on down here through his face. Now with this first little coat of stippling, you don't have to try and cover the whole thing either. I mean, we're going to go over it again. There's going to be a couple more layers going on here. So if you can just thinly get that first coat on there, it doesn't matter that the background's showing a bit through his ears or face or wherever you're working on. Just get that first initial bit on here. The thing with using this little small brush, you could change to a bigger brush as you get into the center here, but I'm just carrying on with this one that I have in my hand. But you definitely could, you know, change up. So the same thing I'm going to do with this, I'm going to leave a little bit showing in between his neck and his head. So I just want to leave, you see I'm leaving a little bit of a gap there. I want that to, because we want to use that background kind of as a little shade in between our sections. So I'm just going to leave that little bit kind of showing there a little wee bit. Like so. And I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect. I just kind of went up into it by accident, but it's not a huge deal. We can work with that. And we're just going to come down here into our eggs. So we're going to try and get in around our eggs, but I don't want to go right up against my eggs either. I want to leave that little bit of a gap around there, around those eggs too. I'm going to pick up the pace here because we need to dry this and move on to the next step. And most of the time when you're stippling like this is pretty much dry. It's not quite dry. I can still feel it's a little bit cold to my touch, but stippling like this kind of dries really quickly. So, I mean, we won't have to dry it too crazy with the hair dryer or the air dryer. All right, so we have that first coat sort of on there, and it's not perfect. We're going to come back in here in a second once we get this dryer on it. So we kind of have our first coat on there. Thank you, Charlotte. This is a 1/4 inch stencil brush, Barbara. 1/4 inch stencil brush. All right. And I think that's pretty good. So now I'm just going to take my stencil brush and I'm going to take my paper towel and I'm just going to kind of clean that off a little bit. I don't want to get it too soppy wet. I'm just kind of rubbing it on my paper towel because I want to dip into a little bit of this burnt umber now. And I'm going to use this to kind of go around my outer edge, along that bottom edge of the ear. We're going to come up this side a little bit. But this is kind of our shadow that we're putting on here. So it's not, you know, how I normally shade if you watch me. I mean, you can, we're going to do a little bit of that later, but this is kind of your shadow that you're going to be using this for. So I'm stippling that in kind of along the base of there, and there's a little fold on this ear, so I kind of went up in there. And then I'm going to come back into my white, and I'm just going to kind of blend that down a little bit. So it's not so screaming loud there. We're just going to just mute that down just a smidge. And we're still just stippling straight up and down with the stencil brush. So now we have that little shadow on there. And we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to grab a little bit of that burnt umber. We're going to come over here on this other ear. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to come along that bottom side. And there's a little fold in here as well. And then we can come along this bottom edge. So far, so good. You think this is simple, looking easy? You could freehand a bunny, sure. It took me like seconds to draw out this little bunny. And the trick is, and the fun part about doing primitive anything is you don't have to be perfect with it. It doesn't have to be a symmetrical looking bunny. I mean, you can just draw one out. It's all good. All right, so I'm going to grab a little bit of that white again. Yeah, it's super easy, Charlotte. So I'm just taking a bit of that white and I'm just kind of muting that down just a little bit. Like that. And then we're going to move on to the bottom edge of his face with our burnt umber. Oh, I'm going to just clean some of that white off of here on my paper towel. And we're going to put some on this bottom edge of his face. And then same thing, we're going to dip into a bit of that white. And then we're just going to mute that down just a little bit. we're still coming in with another layer of white all over, so we can still blend this in a little bit more. So I'm going to grab some more of that burnt umber, and I'm going to put a little bit just under his chin in here. And we'll grab some of that white, and we'll kind of mute that down. A little too much white. Now, I mean, this isn't the end all be all of shading. If you decide that you need a little more brown in there, by all means, go back into your burnt umber and add a little bit more. I mean, you don't have to stop there. If you feel like you've muted it down too much, I mean, just go back in with a little bit more of that brown, and it's all good. You can just kind of keep flipping back and forth. So I'm going to put some down here at the bottom edge. So there's a little shadow down here around the eggs. You know, these little areas in here. And then same thing, I'm going to grab a little bit of that white. I'll just mute this down just a smidge. And that's like the first couple steps. So I mean, there we have our bunny sort of shaded out. So I'm just going to clean off. Hello, Darlia. All right, so I'm going to grab a little bit of alcohol on my stencil brush here just to clean that out, because we do have to come back in with just white, and I want to get that brown out of there. So I'm just using hand sanitizer is what I use to clean it out. Very simple. And then I'm just wiping onto my paper towel. So I'm just going to set that aside. Now for my eggs, I think we'll start with this pink one here. So we're going to just really, all we're going to do is dry brush some paint on there for our eggs, because you can see on my original, you can see some background still kind of peeking through there. It's just because I'm dry brushing that pink paint on there, and I want to be able to see some of that background still in there. So I have this little flat brush here. It's a number 12. You can use any flat. I like this one just because it's got lots of bristles on it and it stays nice and stiff. So I'm going to put a little bit of that pink on my brush, and I'm offloading it because I want it to be a little bit drier, the paint. So, and you can test it on your board. I need a little more paint on there. And I'm just scuffing that paint on there. But you can see that I can still see my background behind in that egg. I don't want to just solidly paint that in. I'm just reloading with some pink. Same thing, I'm just kind of scuffing that on there, dry paint. Just dry brushing there. And I'm just going to put that much on for now. And then I'm just taking my paper towel and I'm cleaning my brush off on there, because we're going to move on to the next color, which is a little bit of marigold. And we'll do the egg beside it. We're going to do the same things, same way I'm loading but with the yellow paint now. And I just get it on there, and we're going to scuff it on here. But I'm still leaving that little bit of background showing through. All right, same thing. I'm just going to clean that off. We're going to move on to some green. I'm using a little sea glass. You can use any colors. I mean, I just chose to use these pastel colors, but I mean, you can use any color for your eggs. And we'll move on to this one. A little green on there. Now this is kind of just the first coat. I am going to come back in here after I get all of these colors on and kind of add it a little bit more where I need to. We're going to put a little highlight on there as well. And then I have, for my last egg, I'm using a little bit of winter blue. So once we get this on here, we're going to move on back up to our bunny. Let me just get this blue egg filled in a little bit. Just turn here. Sorry for the turning. I'm just dry brushing that on there. Nothing scary, because it doesn't have to be perfect. That's the key. Try not to feel like you have to be perfect. So now we have our eggs happening there. So I'm just going to, and I'm not wetting my brush. I'm just wiping it off on my paper towel because I want to use this to dry brush again. So I don't want it all soppy, wet. So I want to just keep that dry. So I'm going to set that aside. We're going to go back into our little stencil brush and we're going to grab our white. And we're just going to add a second coat to our bunny here. I'm focusing on the center of the ears. Trying not to get too crazy on the outside. We are going to go into that outer edge a little bit, but I want to focus on this center part first. And then we can kind of just add a little bit, kind of going into that shaded area like that. So you can just see a little bit of the shade peeking out. It's not like a straight line like it was before, but now it's just kind of muted in there behind the white. So I'm just reloading with my white and adding that second coat in there. Going into my brown just a bit, but I want to still be able to see that little curve line there. So I didn't go too crazy on that. We're just carrying on. We're just going to do all these parts, get them all kind of filled in with a little bit more white so we can not see that much background through there. Get this on here, and then we're going to just touch on that brown edge just a little bit, just to kind of blend in those two colors. But still want to see that brown peeking out. And you can go over the edge just a little bit, just to make that, get that fluffy kind of texture. So you can see now the two ears are pretty much done, and how different it looks with just one coat on his face, as opposed to the second coat on his ears. So you can see the difference, how it filled it in just a little bit more. So we're going to focus on this center. With our white, and we'll do the same thing. We'll pull some of that white down into, how am I for time? Pull that down into this brown just a bit. Okay, and then we'll move on to his body. So we have a lot of brown on here, so I kind of want to spruce this up with some white so we don't have so much brown on his on his body there, because we have two sides around the eggs and under his chin, so there's a lot of brown down here, so we just want to mute that down a little bit. Looking good so far. So we'll get this on, and then we'll add our second coat of dry brushing and a little bit of highlighting on the eggs. And then we can carry on and put the bunny's face on. All right, looking pretty good there. Again, you can play around with this until you're satisfied with, and if you get too much white on there and you feel like you've lost your shade, just dry it and bring some more brown back in there if you need to. If we have enough time, I'll show you another way to kind of spruce it up as well. Fill that in there just a smidge. Okay, so let's stop all that pouncing. So we're going to come back to our flat brush and our eggs. So I'm going back into my pink, and I'm going to scuff just a little bit more of that pink on that outer edge, just to really brighten that edge up. We'll come around here on this bottom edge of the egg. Ooh, that's wet. Should have dried first. All right, and then we can kind of scuff some up into our egg like that. So I'm just going to clean this off on my paper towel. We're going to move on into the yellow. So we're kind of just putting a second coat on here, but not in entirety. We just want to, just on that outer edge, if that makes sense. Some up this edge, and then we can just kind of scuff some in the center. Clean our brush off. Going into the green. Yes, that was green. Do the same thing. These colors are so light that I thought I dipped into my blue there, but I actually, don't worry about it. I went out the line a little bit there. I'm not going to sweat it because we still have to put our little nest on there, and that will probably cover that up. So I'm not going to get too excited about that. I'm fine with it. All right, so we have that one, and we'll clean off our brush and dip into our blue. And we'll get this, I really need to dry this painting because I'm needing to maneuver around it. So we'll do that after I get this blue on here. Okay, whoops, there we go. I just want to take a little more of that green. I can see that that's kind of bugging me a little bit. There. All right, so let's dry this fast. Got a few more minutes here. All right, so now we can bring this over. Now, normally, I mean, I could probably just draw these little eyes and nose on here, but we'll just use the line drawing just because we have it here, and let's just do it. Stylus. All right, I've lost my stylus, so I'm just going to use my pencil. I see my stylus out of the corner of my eye now that I say I lost it. Okay, I can sort of see that. So I'm just going to take some black and fill in his nose and eyes. Whoops, we went out in lines just a little bit there. We will fix that after. All right, we'll fill in his eyes. I'm just using a little 10-0 liner brush to fill these in because they're tiny areas and the liner works well. All right. And I'm going to dry that and fix that little part on his nose that I messed up. Thank you, Karen. I'm just going to grab a little bit of white and right there at the corner of his nose, I kind of messed up, but that's how easy that is to fix it. Yeah, Mary Lou, I like the stippling too, and it's fun to do. I mean, and it's fast and easy, and I mean, anyone could do it for sure. All right, so now we're going to do a little bit of actually traditional kind of shading that I normally do. So I have my burnt umber here, and I have my angled brush, and I'm just going to load that with a little bit of that burnt umber. And this is where you can you can wash some of this on here if you want to, like this, just to even that out a little bit if you want to. I mean, you don't have to, but you can. If you like the way it looked the other way, I mean, you can leave it. There's no rules when it comes to your painting. You can wash a little bit of that burnt umber on there like that. Likewise on his face, if you feel like you want to wash a little bit of that on there. Under here, you can do the same thing. And it's, again, not perfect. You just want to, and I've watered it down quite a bit on my brush. So I've added quite a bit of water onto my brush to do this. I'm dipping in my water over here and making it quite transparent. So that's how I'm doing that. All right, so we have that, and then we can go around his nose just a little bit with this burnt umber, just so it's got a little bit of depth in there, so it's not kind of just sticking out there in no man's land. Same thing around his eyes. You can add a little bit around his eyes. What are we for time? I got 9 minutes. I think we're going to be okay. So now we're just going to add a few little details here. And I'm going to grab a little bit of white. Then I have my shader out here, and I'm going to put a little bit of white along that top edge of his nose, just as a little highlight. All right, and where can we go from here? Let's grab our liner brush. I'm going to put some stitching down the center of his face. So I'm just going to add a little water to my liner brush, dip into my black, and we're just going to go straight down the center of his face. Kind of right up to the center of his nose, like that. And then we're just going to skip over his nose, of course, and then just keep right on going. Right up the center. I also added a few little hash marks on his ears. Just, you know, because he's a raggedy old bunny. You want to just make a little bit like that. Can you see those okay? And I did a couple down here on his body as well. Kind of like tic-tac-toe boards almost. All right, and then for his eyes, I just used my liner, a little bit of white, and I put a dot in there and a little highlight along the bottom. And then we can give him some eyebrows with some black. And then I'll dry brush his cheeks with a little bit of that pink that we used for this egg. We still have it on our plate, so I'm just going to take my little lunar blender. You can use your tiny stencil brush as well. I'll just add a little bit of a pink hue there on his cheeks. And we're going to come down here, and where's my little flat brush again? I'm going to put some white on my flat brush this time. And I'm going to add a little highlight to the top of my eggs. So I'm just dry brushing that little bit of a highlight on there. A little too much paint on there, so we're going to scuff that on down here. And we're going to do that on all of our eggs. And then we're going to build up that nest. We got 5 minutes, so I think we can do it. All right, so we have our little highlights on there. Now for the nest, I'm just going to use a #1 round. And I'm going to dip into these colors here. So I have some yellow and some burnt umber. I'm going to use a little bit of that kind of mixed together. And I'm just going to take my round brush and I'm just going to kind of twist it in my hand. Can you see that I'm kind of rolling it back and forth? What I'm doing just to make these little sprigs here. Again, they don't have to be perfect. You can just bring them in wherever. I'm going to add a little water to my brush to get that to flow off of there a little bit better. So you can use the yellow and the burnt umber, and then we can add a little bit of white, a little bit of black in here. So kind of wherever they sort of land. And then you can bring some down across the front. I'm running out of burnt umber on my plate. A little more yellow down here, I think. So then we can grab some white and kind of just pull in some of that in there. You just kind of want to make it look like some hay or straw down here. It doesn't, like I said, I don't want to cover up all of my eggs. I just want to put a little bit of something down here. That one got a little bright, so we're going to grab a little bit of that burnt umber and just kind of knock that down so it's not so stark white there. You can actually grab some of the black as well and pull some of that black in there. Just however, you know, wherever it kind of lands. So we have our little nest sort of happening on the bottom there. And you can go back and play with it, but I only have a few minutes left and I want to put his little bow on his neck. I'm going to grab my liner brush again and some black. And I'm just using a squiggly line. We're just going to do like a squiggly line all the way around the base of his neck here. And then we're going to put a little bow in the center. And I just squiggled that too. Wiggled, squiggled, however you want to say it. And then we can bring the ties, the ties down here. Right onto the eggs. You can go over it. Gives it a little bit of, when you paint over the top of things, it gives it a little bit of depth in there. All right, what am I missing? Some dots on his cheeks. How many minutes do I have? 1. Dots on his cheeks, little white dots. And then lastly, what I did was I have a little chip brush here, and I'm going to do this quick. And I grabbed some gray, slate gray, and I kind of just, I need this slate gray to come out. So I have my chip brush, and it's really jaggedy on the ends, right? So I grabbed that and kind of like worked that into my gray. And then I just pulled some of that gray right over top, over my background, over my bunny, and just made that look, I liked the way it looked. It was just a little bit of a, more like a vintagey sort of look to it. Made it look a little more old. If I could get these straight up and down instead of all over the place. There we go. That's what I did. That's it.